Carrington.
Hi, Erin. How are you today?
I'm excited because we're talking about wedding food.
Food. So fun.
I'm not a great cook. I have aspirations to be one, so I enjoy eating other people's delicious food that they've cooked
Agreed.
for me at your wedding as a guest.
Because you're inviting us, right?
Exactly. We're all invited to your wedding.
Yes.
Plus two. We don't even need to bring dates. We'll hang out with each other.
No,
It's
no,
fine.
exactly.
Fine. But I'm excited because I think that this, to me, when we start working with our couples, and now more than ever, I think couples, they want an amazing experience for their guests. They want to share their love of, like, maybe they live in New York City, their love of their city, their love of their heritage. Maybe they're Colombian or, from Germany or something, and they want to share like the wedding soup or the
Yes.
haksupa.
What a fun time that was.
Right? Haksupa? Is that what it was called?
I think it was. All right. Vanessa, call us and tell us if we got
Vanessa
it wrong.
or yeah. um, or really Dennis, call us and tell us we're
Yeah.
embarrassing and butchering your German. But so what we love about that, because we reference this and we're smiling thinking about it, was because you can share so much of your heritage and your lives through food. And I think that I'm so excited to like hopefully be like hosting dinner parties at my home now, and like it might just be spaghetti and meatballs, but like it's just, there's something about inviting someone into your home, serving them a beautiful meal, clearing their plates for them and making them feel welcome. And I think that's what we
100%.
bring into your wedding day. And so to create this experience for your guests, so much of it has to be around food,
Agreed.
because everyone remembers a really bad DJ and everyone remembers bad food at a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
You can
They do.
spend $100,000 on your flowers, but if you have a bad entertainment and bad food, ain't no one talking about your flowers. Am I right? I think so.
Those mashed potatoes were cold.
Cold and salty and bleh. Um, so let's break it down. So for the sake of this podcast, Carrington and I, we're going to break it down into 3 different categories.
Mhm.
So when you start thinking about your food, I want you to think about podcast episode 1. What do you want your guests to say when they leave your wedding weekend? And if it is that they dance the entire time from the second they walked into the reception, a plated meal is not a good fit. And either is a buffet. So we want to do stations that can be set up throughout the night. Maybe we swap them around. But for the sake of this podcast, we're going to break it into 3 different categories: buffet,
Mm-hmm.
stations, which are different from a buffet, even though people
Mm-hmm.
sometimes think they're the same, and then a plated meal, which has different categories. Do you do any buffets? When's the last time you did a buffet?
Um, I did a buffet a couple weeks ago in Nashville.
Oh,
And that was the first time that I had done a buffet in a really long time. Well, actually I take that back. I did 2 buffets this year.
did you?
Um, I did. I did one at Lake Norman as well. Um, and sometimes, well, yes. So I would say that buffets are not as common. I think some caterers push them more than others. I
Mhm.
think when we're talking about, a couple that wants a little bit feel a little bit more modern and fun, and I don't want to say upscale because that's not right,
No.
but just a little bit more what would you say? We just don't see it as much. I don't
You
know why.
don't.
It's the time. It's just a trend.
Well, I think it's a trend. I think it was a trend. I think people used to say, let's do a buffet because it'll be cheaper than a plated meal. And it
Yeah.
turns out it is
It's not.
not. It's
Yeah.
usually more expensive because the caterer has to assume that everyone's going to take a
Yep.
piece of steak and a piece of salmon or whatever
Yes.
the heck you have on the
Yep.
buffet. So, and I also think you can get a lot more creative with stations. But for the
Agreed.
sake of this, we'll kind of breeze over buffet quickly. But a buffet is just where we'd set up, salad, starch, like everything all in one line,
Mhm. Yep.
a little cafeteria style. I personally, and I don't want to offend anyone, I don't like a buffet. I do not like a buffet at a wedding for this reason. If you do a buffet, do whatever
Yeah.
the heck you want to do at your
Yeah.
wedding.
Yeah.
As a guest, Carrington knows this and can vouch for me. I am clumsy. I fall. I run into things. I drop things. I break
This
things.
is true.
Fact. Like, I'm always bruised. People always look at me with a side eye. Like, I'm always injuring myself. And so I don't want to carry the
Mhm.
forks and the
Mhm.
thing. It's just, it
Yeah.
causes me anxiety.
Yeah, and the other thing I think that I don't love about it is that, especially if you're talking about a higher guest count, anything above, I would say 50 people, you in order to keep people from rushing the buffet and the line being out into the, garden, is that you got to release table by table. And I think people don't love that. I think then they feel like it's a seniority thing, and they
Yeah.
have, some people are literally sitting there for another half an hour just staring at each other, and I don't love that experience.
Yeah.
um, so I think that's why we don't see as much of it.
I
But
also, oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, I also think if you want to do a buffet, and again, if I'm not at your wedding, don't worry about me. If I'm at your wedding, don't worry about me. But one of the things that I think is what can make a buffet feel a little bit more elevated, perhaps, is do a served plated salad.
salad,
So serve your
absolutely.
guests a salad when they come in, and
Absolutely.
then they have something to eat. Or we've done where we put charcuterie boards on the plate on the table at first.
Absolutely.
So give them something to
Yep.
nosh on, and then they're not like all running and starving for the
Right.
buffet. And then
Right.
you can also do your dessert. So serve them a plated dessert. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think
And you don't
again,
want hangry people.
you
Nobody
don't.
wants to be hangry at a wedding.
Because I think you can still have a buffet, but then break, if you like the concept of like all of that, break it up into still do stations. It can be just a broken down buffet.
Yeah.
That could be stations as well.
100%. So I think it is common for some people to kind of mash the two, buffet and stations, but it is different. Stations is like Erin said, it's a little bit more broken up. So if you're like she said in the beginning, if your main goal is for everybody to be up out of their seat, dancing the whole night, then stations is a great option for you,
Mhm.
because they can be open for a longer amount of time. The band can crank up and people just grab what they want to grab when they want to grab it.
Mhm.
The other thing I really love about stations is the ability to get a little bit creative about it. So I have a client that's coming up in September who they wanted to do some really cool, different, um, kind of global
Mhm.
feel of their stations. And if you put it down on paper and look at it as a plated meal, you're like, this does not go
Yeah.
together. But if you put it in these small plate stations, and that's how we look at it, it's let's create a small plates menu. Um,
Yeah.
and you break it up by that, and then your guests can go, I'm going to go to the the sushi station and grab a couple of rolls, and then I'm going to go dance, then I'm going to get a drink, and then I'm going to go to the carving station.
Mhm.
So it doesn't have to be as what we would consider like a plated meal
Yeah.
formality cohesion. It can be more fun, and like, have you
Like
been, and we did,
grazing.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we did a wedding several years ago, that the groom was German, the bride was American, but they had traveled the world, and
Mhm.
so much of what they chose reflected places that they had traveled. So it's
It's a good
just such
menu.
a great way to tell a story. And I think we talked, I don't even know if we did this or not, but I think we talked about it, about doing like a little roadmap and checking off
We ended up
the,
not doing it, but it was a good idea.
it was a good idea. We need to do it, but
Yeah.
checking off. We went to the Japanese station, and then we went to the
Mhm.
South American station, and so it's a whole nother layer of opportunity, I think,
Oh
especially if
yeah.
you just want it to be a free flowing, like not as formal, like just have a good time experience.
I also think that when you're, again, like, what, like, to reference that wedding or another wedding of like, this is our favorite restaurant, this is the best dish that they have. And then also talk to your caterer and the chef. I think because the chef, it can be like where they're like, oh, I do Asian Southern fusion. And you're like, "Mm."
Yeah.
And so kind of like letting the chef create something, to me,
Yeah.
is so much fun. And I think
Agree.
it's also a way to share things that maybe your guests wouldn't normally order at a restaurant.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of stations. I think stations are really fun. I think you need to have enough of them. I
Mhm.
think um, I want 4 stations at every wedding, even if one is the salad station and
Mhm.
one is whatever. I think
Yeah.
I think it's like,
I agree. Yeah, because you want it to feel complete.
Yeah. And I don't
And
want you to make me make my own salad at the salad station. I want you I swear, maybe I am.
Erin has a lot of high
I
expectations
do.
if she's coming to your wedding. So
I really, everyone, I hate this. My college roommate just got married a couple weeks ago in Sedona, and everyone was like, what do you think? And I was like, this is amazing. They're as happy as can be. The food's delicious. The drinks are flowing. The band is great. Like, I don't go into it with a critical eye, but if I'm planning your wedding with you, I do.
yeah,
Because I think that there's a way to like show delicious food, and there's a way to like showcase that with your guests, that I want it to like, but I also want it to be easy for your guests. I guess this goes back to the same thing with the buffet. And in all disclosure, I'm from Pennsylvania, born and raised. We do plated meals, or we did. Like when I first moved here, I remember, and also know your crowd. We went to a station's wedding, and everyone up in like New York and Pennsylvania and New Jersey, that station would be a cocktail hour. So everyone was like, yeah, we're going to sit down for dinner. I remember everyone, I've never seen people more drunk in my entire life than all the Northerners at this wedding in Greensboro, because we were waiting for like,
dinner.
we had the mashed potato
Oh
station
my
and the
gosh.
oysters, but we also need more food. So
Yeah.
just knowing like that's kind of, I don't want if you come to my home, do not clear your plate. I don't want you to have to work for your food. That's just my thing. But I love a good stations. I love small plates that you can go, and the chefs there making it really interactive and fun.
Yeah, and that's another good point. Like stations is a great opportunity to have live action stations,
Yeah.
which can be something like obviously a carving station, it can be a sushi rolling station, it can be a chicken and waffle station where they're making the waffles in front of you. So talk to your caterer when you sit down and have that initial conversation. Talk about we've done this several times where we say to the chef, if you could do anything that would just really be exciting for you, what would it be? And let their creative wheels turn too. And it can be this really fun collaboration between the chef, who this is what they do and this is what they get excited about. And I will say, wedding chefs, there's things that they're going to do over and over and over. So they would get, most times I find that if you come to the chef and say, hey, we want to do something cool, what would you do? Like if you could do anything, what you want to do, they're going to get excited about your wedding.
Yeah.
And they're going to get invested in your wedding. So that's a fun thing to do too. But I wouldn't say, if you go to sit down with your caterer and you're like, I really want to do whatever it is, some kind of specialty like a paella or something like that. And the chef is like, well, yeah, we could definitely do it, but I don't feel super comfortable, or I'm not super familiar. Then maybe kind of rework around something that they are more comfortable doing, because you don't want to create some kind of crazy menu that they're not going to do well.
Right.
You talk to them about, okay, what do you guys do well? Like, what are your top recommended things that are fan favorites, that are guest favorites, and work from there as well. So I think that's super important when you're talking about stations, and presentation, and also, talking about when you're deciding on the type of service, think about your venue. What's the setup? Is there an on-site kitchen? Are you bringing in all the kitchen equipment? When you're choosing your menu, what's involved in that? You have to bring a fryer in, you have to bring a specific type of oven in. So there are a lot of layers in choosing what your type of service is, and just making sure that that meshes with the structure of your venue or the structure of your event, where, if you are doing like a tented wedding out in the middle of a field, what do we have to bring in?
Right.
Have to have power. How much power do we have to pull for that? So making sure that that all meshes with the type of service that you're envisioning. If you're doing a plated meal, so that's the third type of service that we're talking about, and you're out in a field, or you're out, on the farm, in a beautiful tent, but where is that all being plated? And we're talking about 200 people, and how far does the staff have to walk from the kitchen to the tent to serve 200 people? So all of these things are super important to talk
Do you
through.
need to rent 200 plate covers? And are they the right size for the plates? Because the plates might be smaller.
Yeah. So talking about not only what type of service you love, so, plated stations, buffet, but what works for your venue, what your caterer is really comfortable with, and then picking what you're leaning towards. So if you are leaning towards a plated menu, there's some options there too. There's some really cool options. So
I love plated.
if
Yeah.
you, well, it's a formality, people love to have a seat, I
I don't
find.
like chicken, beef, or fish plated. Let me preface.
Right, right. So that brings up a good point. So when we talk about, okay, we've decided on plated, now we have a couple of options to consider. We can do family style, which is become really on trend in the last few
It
years,
is.
not during COVID, but
I am doing it next weekend and I'm very
well, we're
excited.
actually doing it in September. I'm
Yep.
so glad to see it coming back. But it's where your caterer is serving the dishes onto the table and everyone's sharing, like family
Matters.
style,
Yep.
which is a really great conversation starter. Like it's interactive. It's a really fun and a little bit more laid back version of a plated meal. Then there's a duo plate, which I love. Aaron and I both
Love.
are duo plate enthusiasts.
Yep.
One, because it's less work for you. You're not having to collect entree selections from your guests and having those cards printed and selecting a specific seat for everyone. You're choosing two really exciting, great entrees, whether it's, a crab cake and prime rib, or, surf and turf, or if it's something, don't, grilled chicken and filet is kind of boring, but
Yeah.
that do
Everyone knows, I mean, not everyone. Carrington knows, not
everyone.
everyone. Everyone talks about it, I'm sure. I love a short rib. I love
Yes.
a short
Yes.
rib. Now, I will say I have a lot of couples and clients that don't go in that direction, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
They're still a little iffy about the short rib, but why I love a short rib on a duo plate is it's not a steak that you're having to worry about the temperature for 200 guests, because that's always a concern,
Yep.
but it keeps cooking. The longer it cooks, the more delicious it is. Like I mean, I think it's the Angus Barn here in Raleigh has like the best duo plate where it's like, I mean, they do all of their beef well. Like you can do filet at the Angus Barn because that's what they're known for, but or a tenderloin. But then they have like amazing huge grilled shrimp
Sure.
or something. And so I think it's, I mean, to your point, it's so much easier to do a duo plate. Sometimes it's hard with steak, and usually I find that the venue or caterer will tell you that. So, but like a short rib continues to cook. But if I think people underestimate how hard it is to really get all of those RSVPs the right way. And then you do a menu card, which we always recommend for plated or family style, or duo. But like, it's hard because they're like, oh, I wanted the salmon. I didn't know the fish
They'll
was
change their
salmon.
order on
Mhm.
site, and you're like, no, I've got it written down right here.
And you have to,
Um,
and again, like you have to think about
yeah,
guest experience. So you want
yeah,
them to get what they want, but you also don't want dinner service to take an hour and a half because they're having to
sure,
go back and cook more. So I
100%.
love, I love
I
plate.
love a duo. It's an opportunity for you to pick something, unique. Your guests are excited because it's two entrees in one. You're not collecting you're still collecting RSVPs, but you're not collecting entree selections, which a lot of times when we're doing that, people will just put one steak and one fish, and then you
Yeah.
don't know who it is and you have to call them. And so it's a whole thing. And a lot of times I do find with entree selection, the menu is more limited for whatever reason. And so you're kind of limiting yourself to something that could be boring,
Mm-hmm. I agree.
because you're trying to please a lot of people. And so you're kind of pigeonholing yourself into selections that maybe are not that exciting, and feel very repetitive from
Mhm.
other events that you've been to. But it really depends on what is in your caterer's wheelhouse.
Yep.
And what, if you're willing. I just had a client choose a trout as
Ooh,
part of their
yeah.
duo plate. And it's because it was up at Old Edwards Inn, and they have their own trout, wild caught trout
Oh,
farm.
cool.
I don't know how it works,
And I
but
wouldn't ever order trout at a
no,
restaurant, but I would definitely try it at a wedding.
right, right. So, if you're doing a destination wedding, or you're at the Angus Barn, or ask what the specialty is, ask
Mhm.
what's a local gonna order, and put that on your menu. That's so fun. That's why your guests are coming to have this experience. So, trout in the mountains of Western North Carolina, 100%. If you're out at the Outer Banks, or do a tuna,
And
guests are
also,
gonna tell you if there's something that they can't eat. They're not going to be
100%.
quiet about it. So
They're not.
that brings up another point.
Mhm.
When you're collecting these on your RSVP, you're going to put a line that says, "Please note any dietary restrictions." Do not please put dietary preferences because that will open a whole can of worms that you do not want any part of.
Yeah.
So they'll tell you, most chefs nowadays they're built to make sure that they're able to accommodate everyone. So the gluten-free, that truly, the celiac,
Vegan. Yeah.
fruit or nut allergies, those kinds of things, they're built in order to make sure that they're catering to everyone. So your
And
guests are going to let you know that they're also going to be prepared
yeah.
in the case that somebody shows up and says, I'm deathly allergic to strawberries and you have
Yeah.
a
And
strawberry field salad.
I think that's the one question I get all the time when we talk about a duo is they're like, what if someone has a food allergy? Your
Yeah.
caterer is going to be prepared ideally with like a vegan gluten-free option.
Yes.
So
Yes.
don't worry about that so much. I just think it's such a nice treat for your guests.
Agreed.
Also like my husband doesn't eat fish, but he'll like, so I'll swap my steak for his fish or what, like, so
Yeah.
don't get
They're gonna
caught up in the
people are
minutia.
people are not
Yeah.
going to leave hungry.
No.
And I have so many, almost I would say 80% of the time when I go to a tasting with a client, they're like, well, I'm afraid somebody won't like this or this doesn't appeal to everybody. Choose what you love. I mean,
Yeah.
as long as it's nothing like something off the wall, like,
Don't serve everyone raw oysters at the plate.
yeah, I mean, people
I
love,
won't
I
eat it.
mean, I don't know, but don't
We would eat it.
get caught up on that minutia of pleasing every single person at your wedding. Choose what you're excited about. And
Yeah.
because you're choosing something that you're excited about and you're invested in, your guests are going to really enjoy it too. And if there is a true issue, your caterer is going to come prepared and you can say, let's do a buffer of, 4 to 5, because I know my crowd,
Yeah.
4 to 5 gluten-free vegan meals, or let's offer some kind of specialty something,
Mhm.
because I know I have a group of these people that
Yeah.
only eat a certain diet. So you'll be prepared, but don't base your whole menu off of 5 people that you're afraid won't eat shellfish.
Yeah.
Um,
I also think to your point on that, like it's a good segue into a tasting. So
yes.
the tasting is so critical because you can see how the food is served. You can see for the appetizers how many bites it takes.
Mhm.
And at the tasting, you can give your feedback. So
Yeah.
in the South, we used to be a really big deal about shrimp and grits. I haven't encountered this too much, but like is the shrimp and grits chicken broth based or cream? I'm from Pennsylvania, so this was a whole learning experience for me. But um, and so you can tweak all of those things with the chef, and a good chef will be okay with that.
Mhm.
I do think sometimes the order of menu tastings are a little bit backwards. So we
Mhm.
taste the I mean, which makes sense. You
Yeah.
eat as a guest
But
would, but
you eat them in chronological when really you should be choosing them backwards.
entree first and
Yeah.
then appetizers.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we'll sit there during a tasting and we'll go, I don't know, I can't figure out this third appetizer or fourth one. I kind of want seafood. I'm like, just wait, taste
Yep.
your entrees, decide
Yep.
on that, and then work
Yep.
backwards.
Yep.
But
And make notes as you go along
yeah,
on, I really love this. This is what I love most. And if there are things that you need to tweak, like a watermelon feta
mm,
skewer, but I didn't love the balsamic on it, or, whatever. You can just make those notes and go through them at the end with chef. But like Erin said, start with the main dish first and fall in
mhm,
love with that first. And then go back to the apps, go back to the salad, make sure that there's no repetitiveness or that
mhm,
things make sense on a menu, a seated sit down chronological menu.
yep,
And a lot of times, I run into this, not a lot of times, but sometimes, where they've already gone and done their rehearsal dinner tasting,
good point.
and that menu's already chosen, and you're like, well, I don't want to step on my mother-in-law's toes, or this feels a little bit the same. Especially like if you're doing kind of a Southern inspired menu and you've got shrimp and grits on both. Go with your gut and what you are so excited about for your wedding menu, and then go back and do your rehearsal dinner, go back and do your apps, go back on and kind of build it around what that main course is going to be for your wedding. Cause that's the coup de grace. That's what people are going to remember. That's what you want to be 100%.
Yeah.
You don't want to have your like crescendo on Friday and then have to choose like, I don't know, fried
Airline
chicken.
chicken.
Yeah, airline
Airline chicken.
chicken. You're
Ugh.
like,
Yeah.
well, we had prime
Last
rib,
year was an
low
amazing.
age
Last
prime
night was
rib.
amazing.
Yeah.
Kobe beef
Yeah.
fried. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I think have fun with your menu. I think
Mhm.
that there are no rules in weddings except take care of your guests,
Yep.
choose what you like,
Yep.
but just treat your guests as if they are you're welcoming them into your home. I think showcasing the food that you love and the flavors while keeping it approachable is great. But don't get so caught up on what you think you should do, and just choose an awesome menu that you guys are like, we're excited. So
Yeah, for sure. And think about seasonal too. So that's one thing that I think we do run into sometimes is you're doing your tasting in December, but your wedding's in June. So when we're talking about seasonal things, which a lot of times those are so popular on menus now because we want it to be that farm to table kind of feel. You
Mhm.
want fresh
Fresh,
ingredients
yeah.
that are being picked up at the farmer's market a few days before. So keeping in mind and talk with your caterer about how they manage that and how you do the tasting on things that are not necessarily fresh versus what will be in June.
And trust the
And what,
caterer.
yeah,
Trust the chef, and when they're telling
yeah.
you what they think, like, trust the chef. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
For
And
sure.
on the opposite end of that spectrum, like if you are getting married in December and you are having an heirloom tomato salad,
It's not gonna be the
that's
same.
not necessarily in season. So, while you can still probably do that, everything we can get it. Well, supply
Yeah.
chain is kind of a weird thing right now, but
Yeah.
in most cases you can have whatever you want whenever you want it, but it just may not be up to par or the best of what it could be. So
Yeah.
be thinking about that when you're selecting your menu. It may be, you're sitting down with your fiance talking about menu and it's snowing outside. So you're like, oh,
Cozy soup.
this soup sounds great. But think about when your guests, it's 90 degrees outside in June, and your guests are like, why did they choose soup?
Yeah, we're not eating this.
So just think, seasonal in menu selections and seasonal and what your guests will enjoy. And in the place that they're going to enjoy it. So, and I think Erin, you touched on another thing when you're talking about your apps and you're talking about your cocktail hour, making sure that things are accessible.
Yeah,
So
easy to eat.
that, they're easy to eat. People are not trying to like cut things in half with a tiny like toothpick
No
knife.
silverware should be required during cocktail hour. That's my
Right.
rule.
So all these things are important to think about. But with the end goal being, like Erin said, that it's just a fun experience that you're really fleshing in your personalities and
Yeah.
what you love, and when you go out to dinner on a date night, like what you would order,
Mhm.
and just have fun with it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you, Carrington.
Thank
I'm
you.
hungry. I'm gonna go decide what I'm
Hungry.
gonna eat for dinner tonight.
I'm sure
But no,
Jeremy's fixing up something great.
he does make tacos, and that's about it. But yeah, again, like Carrington said, and we said, just choose what you love. It's a time to share your personality as a couple with your friends and family. Don't try to be crazy and creative just for the sake of it. Truly find the things that make you guys excited, and your guests will enjoy it. So thank you for joining us as always, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.